Everyone, it's Ansu/Vabhav and welcome to Technopuzzle. In this series of videos, I'll be tutoring you about the basics of Python and programming languages. If you want to learn Python, no matter what your background is, whether you have learned any language before or not, whether you have full or no experience of programming, this may be a good place for you. If you want to learn programming very fastly and easily so that you can start developing full-fledged applications, you should definitely start with a language like Python. It's very easy and lets you pick up concepts very easily and quickly. Although, if you want to learn programming fundamentals deeply, you should start with a language like C or C++, which will allow you to learn any language very easily if you have the fundamentals cleared out properly. For C and C++, there are loads and loads of videos already available on YouTube and various other platforms on the internet. Still, if you want to learn them from my side, please let me know in the comments. But for now, let's just begin the series on Python. Now, the question is, what is Python, right? That's the question. What exactly we are learning here? Well, as you can see, Python is a programming language. Now, the question is, what exactly is a programming language? A programming language is something we use to communicate with the computer because we can't easily communicate with the computer directly using the machine language. Now, the computer cannot understand our language. So, there's a special language for computer which is called as machine language or binary language. It just consists of zeros and ones. So if we have to give any instruction to the computer, we need to supply the instruction in the form of 0 and 1, which is very hard for any human being. So intelligent beings have developed a concept of programming languages, which is nothing but an intermediate for the human language and the computer or machine language. So if we have to give some instructions to the computer, we obviously cannot use our human language as it cannot understand that, and the computer can only understand the machine language. But here's the concept of programming language. If we give instruction to the computer in the form of programming language, it gets converted into machine language and then it understands what we are trying to say. Okay, the next point is programming languages allow us to write programs, collection of instructions or queries, which we can use to run or execute on the computer. Okay, so let's understand this with an example. Let's say this is our Earth's surface. Okay, this is Earth, and this is a human being. H for human, and this is an alien spacecraft which by mistake crashed onto the Earth. And obviously, if there are alien spacecraft, there has to be some aliens, right? So let's say there's an alien right here who has landed on our planet Earth. Now, if he has to know anything that what's going on here and what to do next, he has to communicate with someone, right? So let's say he came across this human. Okay, so if this alien has to talk with this human, how would he do that? Obviously, he will speak. Let's say the alien has a mouth which he uses to speak. So if he says something to the human, it might not be understandable to him, as It's an alien and not a human being like us. Okay, so let's say he said something like this or whatever, but we can't understand this thing. So, what do we understand? We understand our human language. Let's say English for now. So, I am whatever, let's say hungry. So, if he has to say something to the human, he or she needs to convert his or her language to the human language, which will be very hard for the alien to do because he has no knowledge of the human language. So if he gets a device, let's say he has a device that converts his language to the human language, right? So if he says these things into his device, it converts that thing into the human language and then the human can understand that. Okay, so this is the process he needs to go. He needs something intermediate that can convert his language to the human language. In the similar format, the programming languages work. Like this is computer, okay? C for computer, and this is human. So if the human has to say anything to the computer, like I am hungry again, it just simply can't do that because it's his own language, and the computer can only understand machine language, which is his own language, which only contains zeros and ones. So now how would he do that? Well, as we saw earlier, the alien had a device. In this case, the human does not have a device. The human has something called as a programming language. Okay, and he is able to supply his, he is able to convert his own language into programming language easily. Okay, so let's say this is programming languages. So he can convert his language into programming language, and then the programming language gets converted into the binary language of the machine language, and then the computer can understand it. So that's how things work. Now, how to use programming languages? Well, we know that we can give computers instructions using programming languages, but now the problem is how do we use it? We can write programs as a single entity, which is just the collection of all the instructions or queries which we want the computer to respond. This point means that we can write programs. Now, what is a program? A program is basically nothing but the collection of all the instructions and queries which we want the computer to respond. Which we want to give the computer to work on. These are just the instructions which we want to give to the computer. So we can write all those instructions as a single entity somewhere, like in a file or something. And this thing is nothing but a program. Okay. So now, how would we write the instructions? Well, here's where the programming languages come into picture. We have to write those instructions in the form of programming languages. We have to write those instructions using the syntaxes which a specific programming language contains. For example, for Python, let's say we have something called print. This is an instruction in Python to display something on the screen. We will see that later. For now, just understand this is an instruction. Another instruction includes input. So other programming languages contains other instructions to do the same thing, which me which means that all these instructions, whether it's from Python or like a language called C, they all gets converted into the machine language ultimately. So it doesn't matter in which language you are working on. If you are doing the same operation, just the syntax of the language is different. The ultimate thing which you are providing to the computer is the same. So what this means is, if we have to give the computer instructions of what to do, we can create something called programs, as we mentioned, and it include everything. And by everything, I mean every command or every instruction or every query which we want to give to the computer in that single entity or file. And then the compiler or interpreter, which we will understand later, will convert this single entity into computer understandable language, which is 0 1 language or machine language, and then the computer can understand it. Okay, so finally this is it for the first session on Python series. I really hope that you got something, if not all, out of this session. Please let me know in the comments any feedbacks, complaints or queries, and I will see you next time. Goodbye.